Okay, if there was a God and that would mean that we are only not killing each other and acting in chaotic ways because we fear God and that we fear punishment or we desire, I guess, to go to heaven?
Sir, the reason I, as a follower of Christ, respect you is not because I am afraid of God. It's not because I'm afraid I might go to hell. It has nothing to do with it. The reason I respect you is because you're worthy of respect. You have innate value. You're not just an accident. You're a human being created by God for a purpose. God loves you, and when I look into your face, I'm looking into the face of a person who God loves so deeply that he sent his only son, Christ, to bleed and die on a cross for you. That's how much he treasures you. And if I demean you, if I'm disrespectful to you, that is absolute denial of your intrinsic innate value. It's a denial of reality.
Okay. I would have to say that people are deserving of respect because they are your equals, because we are all accidents in the same exact way. We don't have any purpose instilled into us. We just all are by accident, and therefore, since we are all from the same accident, and we desire to continue our peaceful society, that is where our morality stems from.
Okay. Now, my point to you is, do you think you can really live out what you just said? Because if what you just said is true, when that young lady looks you in the face and says, I love you, what you understand is she doesn't have the foggiest idea what she's talking about, because life is meaningless. So she's just spewing out some words, and it's all meaningless.
It's not meaningless. She still has those feelings and those interactions going on in her body. She's telling me what her feelings are inside. It's not us having a purpose doesn't mean that she can't still have emotions.
Yeah, but those emotions are meaningless. They're totally random. And what she really means is you're hot, and therefore I, quote, love you. And when you say to her, I love you, what you really mean is you're hot. So let's see if we can couple. And that's all there is to really reality. And it's all meaningless, but you can have sex, you can copulate, but it's ultimately meaningless. And that's all life is.
Well,
and that's the despair of atheists.
Well, without God, it doesn't mean that love is for some reason based only on physical attraction. And also, everything is, in essence, meaningless. There's no real purpose unless there was the existence of God, and I've still yet to see anything that would convince me of that. So to me, everything is meaningless, and it's the only purpose I have here is to make my own life enjoyable.
Why don't you commit suicide?
Because that would not be enjoyable.
How do you know?
Because I've seen what it's done to other people around them that they love, and that certainly was not enjoyable for them.
How do you know that the person who committed suicide was not in so much pain that suicide was a reprieve from that pain?
That's certainly possible, but that is not the case for me.
Okay, but Albert Camus, the brilliant atheist philosopher, put it brilliantly when he said, when you begin to seriously consider the meaninglessness of life, which you've been articulating, I think, very well and very consistently, and I respect you for it, you've been consistent. When you seriously consider the meaninglessness of life, then the only question you really have to answer is, why not commit suicide? Because when you struggle with the meaninglessness of life, you begin to realize that pleasure, or your happiness, as you referred to, is ultimately meaningless. If my pleasure comes from murdering people, if I start murdering people in cold blood here, that's my definition of happiness. That's how I get my jollies, by murdering people. If I get my jollies from feeding homeless people, starving people, well, that's equally meaningless, but that's the way I get my jollies, from feeding starving people, so I do that. And when you begin to think about that long enough, you begin to realize it really doesn't matter whether I slit his throat or feed him dinner. It's all meaningless, so it really doesn't matter what I do. And when you begin to think about that long enough, you begin to realize that Camus is right when he says, you better struggle through. Why should I continue to suck wind? Why not commit suicide?
I guess if you go to the point where you slit someone's throat or you give them dinner, it doesn't matter in a sense that anything matters. But it's still, that would hurt other people, and while it's making you happy, that's why I see that as injustice, and that's why you should still be punished for it. Now, it does make you happy, and, not that I recommend doing it. I mean, you can go ahead and try if that's the only thing that makes you happy, but I'm thinking that the repercussions of those actions are going to make you much less happy than you were beforehand.
Okay. But I think where you're beginning to go is, Cliff, I really don't think it's all meaningless. I think if you do go out and just murder people, that there really is something wrong there. Aren't you beginning to move in that direction?
It's meaningless in the sense that we don't have a purpose, but as a society, it is still a negative influence. And it certainly isn't desirable because it hurts our society, and thus it hurts the happiness of society as a whole.
All right, how do you and me giving money to support handicapped people help society? Why don't you buy into eugenics? Why shouldn't we wipe out all handicapped people because they are a drain on our limited resources?
Well, they have people that love them, and that would hurt the people that love them, and it would hurt the handicapped people as well. Hurting other people doesn't make me happy. So.
Are you ever going to spank your children?
I haven't come to that crossroads yet. I was spanked as a child, and I would say it had more positive impacts on me than negative.
Good. I think you're finding it very difficult to live a meaningless life. I think you insist upon attaching a great deal of meaning to your family life. I think you're grateful for some of the values that your parents had and held to rather strongly in loving you and disciplining you. I don't think you're just saying it's all really meaningless. The reason I say that God cannot be explained by science is because of my definition of science. Science is based on the repeatability of an experiment. If you say it is something scientifically true, and we've proven it here at this fine university, but if you can't do those same experiments in London or in New York, you don't have science. Scientific knowledge is based on the repeatability of an experiment. So God is not a physical being or a physical process that you can observe and then repeat an experiment over and over again. Not only is that true, but that's true of your family. You don't scientifically prove your family. You develop trust relationships with your family, but you don't scientifically prove people. You learn to trust them. So science is a study of process, how the organism works, and it's based on the repeatability of an experiment. But a human being is not a scientific project. In order to develop a relationship with a person, you learn to trust them and build a friendship. And then when it comes to God, God is not a scientific equation. God is a personal being who creates, but who's not a physical process that you can dissect, observe, and then repeat the experiment over and over again.
But clearly, doesn't the Bible say God's everywhere and God's force is, all around us? So if clearly, basically you're suggesting that there's a force out there which is actively manipulating our world, well, clearly that force must be somehow detectable. That's a pretty significant force. And also, you're proposing very scientific hypotheses, where the universe came from, where life came from, the origin of the earth. Like, those are all very scientific questions. You can't just say, if religion has one answer and science has another, well, which one's right? It has to be put to the scrutiny of science, does it not?
Absolutely not. All right, I'm going to work hard here and try and communicate clearly. Science is a very narrow branch of knowledge. Science is based on studying the physical process and repeating experiments over and over again to find out if there is a law of nature, a scientific law that can be understood. Historical knowledge is totally different, radically different. You do not get Abraham Lincoln back on this campus every September and have him assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in order to prove that Lincoln was truly assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. Instead, historical knowledge is based on not the repeatability of an event or the repeatability of an experiment. Historical knowledge is based on the trustworthiness of eyewitness testimony. Somebody saw Lincoln assassinated. They recorded it. And you study it, not in your science lab. You go over to your history department to study history. Because it's a different form of knowledge.
Right. I would agree that which science can't answer philosophical questions. I'm not trying to say it would, and I can't answer historical questions. I'm not saying it would. So if you were saying that Jesus was a philosopher, if he was a man who was trying to give a way of life, then yes, science can't go one or another. I mean, that's a different branch of knowledge. But to say Jesus rose from the dead, it happened in our physical universe, thus it must have a physical explanation. And thus it is the topic of science, and to prove something that physically happened. If I say I flew through the air, well, there must be a physical reason why that happened, and then that can be a subject of science.
Okay. The Gospels record that Jesus physically rose from the dead.
Right.
And people ate food with him. They grabbed hold of him and saw that he had flesh and bone. But they did not give us a scientific description of how physically he rose from the dead. So we do not have a scientific description of how the dead body came alive again.
Right.
Now, the question of origin, meaning by that, is there an intelligent mind behind this universe, or is there not an intelligent mind? I am convinced is not a scientific question. It is a philosophical, theological question. So you have to use reason, not a scientific process, to conclude whether God exists or not. And the philosophical, rational way I go about it is by asking myself, is it more reasonable to believe that behind order and design there's an intelligent mind, or is it more reasonable to believe that order and design comes about by chance? Is it more reasonable for me to believe that in light of the fact that the universe has a beginning, that there's an uncaused cause, or is it more reasonable to believe it just happened? Is it more reasonable to believe that the ductus arteriosus, that little flap of skin that comes down in every one of our bodies when we pass down our mother's birth canal and switches the blood from going around the lungs to going through the lungs, that kind of amazing order and design, is it more plausible for me to believe that that happened by chance, or is it more reasonable for me to believe there's got to be a mind behind that? When I'm confronted by moral absolutes, like the slaughter of innocent children is wrong, is it more reasonable, based on my experience and observation, to believe that that's just relative morality, it's not objective? Or is it more reasonable for me to believe the slaughter of innocent children is absolutely objectively wrong? If it is absolutely objectively wrong, there's got to be a mind prior to the human mind that defines what's right and what's wrong. Because if there is no mind prior to the human mind that defines right and wrong, it's obviously the human mind that defines it, and it's all relative.
I mean, I would agree that I would think I'm relatively consistent, and I would say it's all relative, in that I personally see, obviously, the slaughter of children as horribly wrong. That is through my mind. Lions commit infanticide, and that's how it's actually evolutionarily beneficial for them to commit infanticide, and they obviously don't see it as wrong. But we, as humans, we evolved compassion, and when I see innocent people being harmed, that physically makes me feel sick, and so thus I'm going to try and do what I feel is right in my mind, and I don't think that necessarily has to come from a God. I'm just behaving how my mind was set up to behave.
What is compassion?
What is compassion?
Mm-hmm. You said it. So what did you mean when you said you said we evolved compassion.
Right.
What is compassion? What does that mean when you say we evolved compassion?
Well, I guess I would say compassion is a feeling of sympathy towards other people, people outside of yourself. I would say it would be a feeling of, I guess you feel sorry for them, you connect with them, you feel empathy towards other people besides yourself. And that is a baffling question because most people, evolution typically talks about survival of the individual, who's the strongest, who can pass on more offspring.
Uh-huh.
But for humans, we work better in groups. We're group animals. And thus, to feel connection towards your brothers allows you to work together with them, allows you to not kill them, allows you to not steal from them, and thus create something better and stronger. And thus, lone animals have no problem harming others, and it's all about themselves, and that's their survival mechanism. But our survival mechanism is to work together, and that's why we do feel compassion. And so I don't see why it necessarily has to come from God.
Okay. I am convinced that I don't have to be compassionate. I am convinced I can be totally self-absorbed, totally narcissistic. I'm convinced that I could live a life of ripping as many people off to feather my nest in the suburbs